Okay, today's daf is Nun Bet. We are starting at the new Mishnah, which is where we left off yesterday. Mishiyatta lelich ba'ir sheme Eruvin Daf. So this is talking again about somebody. The question is, what does it take, if you were to summarize essentially what the issue is in this Gemara? It is, we're right here. This is where we are. Yeah. So the issue in these sugyot is, what does it take to establish an eruv? In other words, how far do you have to go to demonstrate that you've relocated yourself to the position of the eruv? And so the Mishnah says, "Mish yatsa lelech ba'ir shema Eruvin ba ve'chaziro chavero hu mutar lelech v'chol bnei ha'ir asurin divrei Rabbi Yehuda." We actually learned this, and we learned some of the ensuing Gemara here yesterday. It was encapsulated. It was referenced in yesterday's daf. So it says somebody who left their city or started walking to go to another city that they make an eruv for. In other words, let's say there were two cities that are 4,000 amot apart. In between is a landmark. So this person's idea was, I'm going to start walking from my house now. I'm going to come to the landmark, which is 2,000 amot from here. That's where my eruv is. And then I get another 2,000 amot to the next city. But what happened was, this person started walking and his friend said, hey, it's going to be very windy. It's going to be this. It's going to be that. Go back home. Don't go. So Rabbi Yehuda says, since the person started out on the way to go, that's enough to make the eruv. So the next morning he's allowed to walk. He's allowed to walk the full 4,000 amot, 2,000 amot to the landmark and 2,000 amot past it. Why? Because he started going on Erev Shabbat, even though he didn't complete the process. And Rabbi Meir says, Rabbi Meir Omer, Kol shu yachol le'arev v'lo erev, hariza hamar gamal. Rabbi Meir says, no. Anybody who could have made the eruv and didn't do it. In other words, he could have walked to the spot, or he could have put bread at the spot and he didn't do it. He turned back. But he started the process. In other words, it was a truncated process. That's Hamar Gamal. It's a camel driver and a donkey driver, which we learned is the phrase that they use in the Mishnah to mean he's caught in between two things. Okay, he's pulled by two different animals. In other words, he has to assume the worst. So he has to assume as if he did put the eruv there, which means he can't go anywhere in the opposite direction. So let's say, for example, we're talking about that there's a city over here, and to the west there's another city, 4,000 amot. In the middle is a landmark to the west. So 2,000 amot to the west is where he was thinking of putting the eruv. Now if you put the eruv at 2,000 to the west, that means he can't go anything to the east. Correct? Now what he did was, he put the eruv at the 2,000 amot to the west, or we don't know, right? He never made it. So according to Rabbi Meir, on one hand we have to assume the worst, that he did put it, which means he can't go to the east. And we have to assume the worst, that he didn't put it, which means he can't go past that point either.
So the situation is where he left his home and
he was sent home.
Stopped him. Oh, so he went back.
He went back. He never went.
So he went back home. He didn't stop at his friend's house. That's what it's okay.
No, the friend sent him back home and said, don't go.
Send him back home. Okay.
Right. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, the fact that he started to go is enough. So he established his eruv by starting to go. According to Rabbi Meir, no, since he could have actually physically gone and put bread or stood there, and he didn't, so we give him the worst of both worlds. We say that it's as if the eruv is there in the sense that he can't go even one step to the east. But it's as if the eruv is not there, that he can't go past the landmark to the rest of the way to the city. So he loses both.
Was it Rabbi Meir that did that same thing with the tree, with the 4 amas and 8 amas?
No, there was somebody else. But he had another case similar to this that we're going to see. So Maishna, the Gemara says, Maishna Ihu, Maishna Inu. So the entire group, everybody in that city had planned to walk 4,000 amot the next day to go to this other city. So why does the Mishnah sort of focus in on the one person? Mishiyata, the one person who started to go, he is allowed to walk the rest of the way in the morning, but everybody else who might have wanted to go cannot go. That's what the Gemara is asking. Okay? So the Gemara answers, Amar Avuna hacha b'mayaskinan kegon sheish lo shnei batim uvenehem shnei tuchumei Shabbat. Iu keven denafak leila orcha hava le'ani vave'ashireinenu. So the point is that since everybody was thinking that they were going to go, but this guy was the only one who actually has a house in the other city. He has a house in the other city. So when he started to walk, really he was showing what? I don't want to be in my house here. I want to be in my house there. I'm definitely going to go there. I'm seriously going to go there. The other people changed their plans. They said, we're just not going to go there at all. by not moving with him, by not starting to walk, it's retracting their plan altogether. But for him, since he actually had a house in the other city, he was uprooting himself from this house and saying, I'm going to that other house tomorrow. So since he was doing that, his eruv takes effect. Even though he didn't walk that far, he ended up staying back at house number 1. But the fact that he began the process, he began the journey, and he has the house in the other city, it gives more samchut, so to speak. It gives more like credibility to his walking, to his leaving of house number 1. So that's so there.
The Mishnah only speaks about him going,
right,
not anybody else.
Right, so
you said it didn't go with him. Did you literally mean that?
Yeah, because the Gemara is assuming...
With him, it would have been okay?
The Gemara is assuming that there's one guy here that's special. Right? Because it's saying that this one person went to a city, Sheme Eruvin Daf, that everybody else wanted to make an Eruv with it as well.
I don't understand the Gemara question. Why is that a problem?
What do you mean?
Why is that a problem? That they're focusing on him? In other words, they're focusing on him because they want to say that
because it said in the Mishnah, Hum mutar lelech, he can go, and everybody else is not allowed to go. So that implies that everybody else also wanted to go, but they're not allowed to.
Okay.
Because they didn't start out with him to make.
Apparently they started walking with him. But they went back because they didn't have a house, they didn't have a place to go in the other city, so they might have just retracted altogether.
So then the question is, I see, okay.
So the question is, why is one individual singled out from among everyone else? If everybody ended up not going, so why is he singled out that he's allowed to go the next day and nobody else is allowed to go? And the answer is because he had an actual place in the other city, so his plans to go were not canceled by the fact that he decided not to go right now. He could still decide to go later. Everybody else, by not going right now, basically said, we're not going to go at all. That's the way that the Gemara is understanding.
The question that they're raising is, can you rely on somebody else's house?
Apparently, maybe you would think, right, so maybe you would think that everybody, since they're together with this one guy, maybe this one guy, the fact that his Eruv takes effect will count for everybody.
And the answer is no.
And the answer is no, only him, right. Right. So now the Gemara says, Tanya Nami Achi, we learned in a Braita similarly. That that if a person has 2 houses and in between them is 2 Tichumei Shabbat, meaning there's 4,000 amot in between. Once he starts walking on the way, he acquired his Eruv according to Rabbi Yehuda. In other words, we see from a Braita that this case was a real case. In other words, that a person who just starts walking because he has a house in the other place, the fact that he doesn't finish walking doesn't matter. There's significance to his beginning walking because he has a place in the other city. And a regular person who did the same thing, we would say, okay, cancel his plans. But a person who actually has a place in the other city really is planning on going there. Okay, so it's a different story. Yeter al ken amar Rabbi Yosef bar Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yosef bar Rabbi Yehuda, his son said, afilu mitzvah chaviro ve'amar lo linpo et chamahi et zinahi lemachar mashkim v'olech. That even a person whose friend found him and said, stay here, it's too cold, it's too hot, even that person is considered to have acquired an Eruv. So the question is, what does that mean, even that person? It's the same thing. What's the difference? What is Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda adding? So now we have a machloket here. So Amar Rabba says, Kule alma lo pligei ditzarich. Okay, I'm sorry, wait, did I skip something? No. Ki pligei lehachzik. I'm sorry. Amar Rabba said, Lomar kule alma lo pligei ditzarich. Ki pligei lehachzik. So there's 2 interpretations of this. There's 2 interpretations of these 2 interpretations in Rashi. And Rashi actually goes through the entire sugya explaining the development of the sugya according to both positions. However, the one that's accepted by almost all Rishonim and Rashi himself is the second one. So we're just going to go with the second one, since that's the one that Rashi endorses and that all the other Mefarshim endorse. So he says it means like this. Lomar, everybody agrees that in order to acquire the Eruv from a distance, the person has to make a statement and say, my place of residence for Shabbat is at the landmark that's 2,000 amot from here. He has to say it. The argument is, lehachzik, does he actually have to walk? Does he have to start walking? That Rabbi Yehuda is saying that he has to actually start walking. Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda is saying even if his friend said, no, don't go, stay here, and he never actually walked, it's still good enough.
Oh, he said it?
Because he declared it.
Do you have to say in front of any witnesses?
No, just a declaration. Rav Yosef, Amar Rav Yosef says the opposite. Everybody agrees he has to start walking. Ki pligei, where they argue is Lomar. whether he needs to say anything. In other words, according to Rav Yosef's version, it's the opposite. Everybody agrees you have to start. Everybody agrees that you need to start walking. The only question is whether you have to say anything or not. Okay, so so according to Rabbah, a verbal declaration for sure is necessary. The question is whether you have to do something physical. According to Rav Yosef, no, physical is definitely required. The question is whether you need verbal.
Okay, and up to this, everybody agrees that of the right. In other words, everybody agrees that if he as long as he makes a verbal declaration, everybody agrees that it's.
Well, no, because according to the first view, according to Rav Yehuda, you need both. You need both. You need a declaration and you need to walk. According to the second version, according to Rabbi Yehuda, you need to walk. Okay. So, and that's what the machlok. According to the first version, everyone agrees you need to make a declaration. The question is, do you need both a declaration and walking? Okay, that Rabbi Yehuda says you need a declaration and walking. According to the second version of Rav Yosef, he says that everybody agrees that you need to walk. Okay, the question is whether you need to say anything or not. Now, in both cases, though, it seems that Rabbi Yehuda is the one that requires both. In other words, according to both versions, Rabbi Yehuda requires both. The question is, what does Rabbi Yosef or Rabbi Yehuda not require? Right? Does he not require a verbal declaration, or does he not require something physical? Okay, but he's only requiring one out of the two. That everybody agrees on, and everybody agrees that Rabbi Yehuda requires both. Okay, now this is according to Rashi's interpretation. The first interpretation of Rashi understands it differently. That the issue here is that in Rabbi Yehuda's version, you decide yourself not to go. And in Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda's version, it's that someone else said, stay here, don't go. And that Rashi says, that's really the issue. That the machloket is whether somebody else telling you is necessary or not. So when Rabbah says lomar, it means somebody else telling you. And when it says no, everybody agrees that somebody else telling you is not required, the question is whether you have to actually start walking or not.
What's the Tosfot view on this? Because they
agree with Rashi in the end. They say in the end they agree with Rashi. They say at the very end, last Tosafot on the left, that uperush acharon de Rashi nira ikar. That the second perush of Rashi seems like the best one. Okay, now the Gemara says, "Kiman azlahad amar ula." The following statement of ula, who does it represent? Somebody who started walking and his friend turned him back. This person is sent back, and established. So what does that mean? If he's returned, why is he established to have an eruv? And if he's established to have the eruv, what do you mean he's sent back? They're mutually exclusive. How can it be both? That's what it means. What he meant was, even though he's sent back home, he still acquired the eruv. Clearly, that is representing the view of Rav Yosef in accordance with Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda. Because what did Rav Yosef say? Rav Yosef said that according to Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda, all you need to do is start walking. Okay, you don't need to say anything. You don't need to verbalize anything. So Ula said, if a person started walking towards the eruv and they were sent back, that's enough. It's established. Rav Yehuda bar Ishtata aitele kalkala de peril Rav Natan bar Oshaya. Rav Yehuda bar Ishtata brought a basket of fruits to Rav Natan bar Oshaya. Ki ava azil shevake ad dinachet darga. When he was ready to leave, in other words, so Rav Yehuda bar Ishtata brought a gift to Rav Natan bar Oshaya, and it was Erev Shabbat, and then he started to leave. He waited until he went one step down on the steps leading out of his house, and then he said to him, Marle bitacha. He said, stay over here tonight. So he let him take one step back towards his home, and then he said, stay here. Why did he do that? Because the one step that he took towards his home establishes an eruv for him, so that the next day he can walk home if he wants to. And it's no problem, but now he's able to stay here overnight because he demonstrated he planned to go home. That was enough to establish him, and now he remains in his place. So lemachar kadim va'azil. So the next morning he gets up and he goes. And now we turn to Amud Bet Kiman. Whose opinion is this? Rav Yosef Aliba de Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda. Again, this is like Rav Yosef's interpretation of Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda. How so? Because Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda, according to Rav Yosef's interpretation, Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda said that all you need to do is start walking. You don't need to say anything, and that's exactly what he did here. He started walking, didn't say anything. But then the Gemara says, "Lo, not necessarily. It could also be Rabbah according to Rabbi Yehuda, because we don't know what actually happened. Could be that Rav Yehuda Bar Ishtata said, "I'm going home now," and walked out the door. It could be that he had both. How do you know that all he did was start walking home? Maybe he said, "See you, I'm heading home now," and he started walking home, and then he said, "Wait, no, stay over." So maybe he actually had two. Maybe he had both qualifications. We don't have to assume that it was only the most lenient view in how to establish an Eruv. It could have been that actually it's Rabbi Yehuda's view, according to Rabbah, because and the Mefarshim explain why do we want to assume that it's Rabbah's view of Rabbi Yehuda, because the halacha follows Rabbi Yehuda, number one, and the halacha usually follows Rabbah against Rav Yosef. So it would be better to say that we follow Rabbah here, and that we follow Rabbi Yehuda, than saying that we follow Rav Yosef in accordance with Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda. So therefore, we assume that no, it's like Rabbah according to Rabbi Yehuda, that really what happened in the situation was he did both. He made a declaration and he started walking. It's just not recorded in the story. And that's why he established the Eruv.
We follow Rabbah,
not Rabbah.
Rabbah, who says that all you have to do is declare.
No, you need both.
That you have to declare
and start walking. Rabbi Meir Omer, Kol Shechol Le'arev. Rabbi Meir said in the Mishnah, anybody who has the ability to make an Eruv, meaning he could have gotten himself to the spot, or he could have put bread there, and he didn't. He just sat home and said, I want that to be my place. Or he even started walking a little bit, and then stopped. That's not enough according to Rabbi Meir. Then he's going to be Chamar Gamal. He's going to be a camel driver and a donkey driver at the same time, and that means he's going to be stuck with an even more limited range of walking than he would normally have. So the Gemara says, we already had this in another Mishnah. Safek, if there's a safek, remember, if somebody leaves an eruv and it rolled outside the tichum, or it got eaten, or it got destroyed, and we don't, if it was already nightfall, we're good. Because when does the eruv take effect? At nightfall. We don't care what happens to it after that. But if the eruv food was destroyed, and we don't know if it happened before Shabbat or when Shabbat had started already, so then we say, Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda, Omrim, Hareza Chamar Gamal. This person is stuck because maybe he set up an eruv, in which case he can't go to the east, he can only go to the west. And maybe he didn't set up an eruv, in which case he can't go more than 2,000 amot to the west. He can't go the full 4,000. So he ends up being stuck with that small range of movement. That's what Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda said. So we already see this. In a case of safek, we say, Rabbi Meir says, that your scope of your range of motion is limited. So how is that different here? So Rashi says, here we're saying, Rashi says, Rabbi Meir ashir mashavele, that according to Rabbi Meir, the person who starts walking but doesn't actually go, why don't we say that he's established his eruv? Why doesn't it work? Because since he's considered a rich person, meaning he's still home, so he could bring his food and place it at the place of the eruv, that's why we're not giving him credit for the eruv. Still Rabbi Meir is going to say that he's Chamar Gamal v'lo k'bnei Iro, and he's not even going to get the benefit of not having an Eruv. In other words, he won't have the benefit of either way. The silek atzmo bekavanato me'alpayim shel tzad sheni leveto. In other words, what he means is, it's not a matter of safek here. Even in a definite case, Rabbi Meir would say that if you put the eruv, right, this is according to Rashi, that if you put the eruv in its proper place, and then it rolled out of its proper place, or it got destroyed, and we don't know when it is, even if it definitely got destroyed before Shabbat, Rabbi Meir would say, you're stuck. Why? Because according to Rabbi Meir, there's two things in eruv, Rashi is saying. One is that you say, I don't want my house to be my residence. And the other one is that you establish it in a new place. So Rabbi Meir says it's not a safek, it's that you removed yourself from place one, and we're not sure if you established yourself in place number two. That's the problem. You didn't establish yourself and even if you definitely didn't establish yourself in place number two, You uprooted yourself from the other side of place number 1 because you definitely said, I don't want the east side of my house. By putting the Eruv there. Now it could be that the Eruv got destroyed, in which case you don't get the extension to the west either. But he's saying that even if you knew it got destroyed before Shabbat, you still lose. Because now you definitely don't have to the west. And you said you didn't want to the east because you said that you didn't want that because you put the Eruv over in the other place. So even though the Eruv in the other place didn't work, it doesn't matter. It worked enough to remove you from the east. Okay, so now... So that's what Rabbi Meir says according to Rashi. So it's not about a safek, he says. He has to learn that. Now, according to the first version of Rashi, there's a way to work it out. Now, we're not going to go into the whole first version of Rashi, but if you look for the first Lashon of Rashi, that, like I mentioned, where he interprets Rabbah and Rav Yosef differently, and therefore he interprets the whole ensuing Gemara differently, and therefore he interprets also this section. He has to interpret Rabbi Meir differently, and because Rabbi Meir is in the argument with Rabbi Yehuda, and he interprets this piece differently. Okay, but according to the version that he concludes with, okay, Rashi's preferred version, this is a problem. Why does Rabbi Meir consider this a safek? It's not really a safek, it's a definite. So therefore he says that that's not the issue. The issue is that there are two phenomena in Eruv. There's the removal of the half that you had before, and the placing of it in another direction, basically.
So the first part would be by walking or saying.
Right, so you removed yourself from the right, but you never established the left.
By putting the bread there. By putting the bread there.
Right, or going there.
Who is saying that it's not a safek?
Rashi is saying it's not that it's a safek. It's a definite that the Eruv is no good.
So what? So then, obviously, Rabbi Meir is raising. I mean, it might not be. He's reading some kind of a safek. Does Rashi say?
He's holding. In other words, according to Rashi, he's learning now. We're just learning the conclusion of Rashi without going through his whole issue of how he got to this. But basically, he worked it out that it has to be that it's not that Rabbi Meir says maybe this was a good Eruv. He holds that it definitely isn't a good Eruv. But he thinks that by walking towards the Eruv in the beginning is enough to say, I'm canceling my ability to use the east side of my dwelling.
He's just clarifying the type of safek that Rabbi Meir...
No, it's not a safek. It's a definite. He removed the east, but he never went and established the west. So it's a subtraction, but he never... It's like he took the piece from the one side, but he never put it on the other side.
Only in the case of where he
started walking, he could have gone and he didn't.
But if he couldn't have...
If he's baderech, if he's walking in the jungle somewhere and he does it, there Rabbi Meir agrees. But since he's home, he could have taken bread and gone and done it, but he decided to stay back. Somebody, he decided not to go.
What I'm not understanding is Rashi refuting Rabbi Meir? Or
no, he can't refute him. He's clarifying.
Right.
He's saying that Rabbi Meir doesn't mean that it's a safek. That's not why he's saying that you're stuck.
That's not what he means. Okay.
Right. He's saying you could interpret it as, and it's the easiest way to interpret this Gemara is that what it means is that that it's a safek.
Right.
Because it's comparing it to the case of safek before.
Right.
So he's saying, no, that can't be what Rabbi Meir meant.
Okay.
He didn't mean that it's a safek. He meant that there are two components. There's the canceling out. In other words, the way that Rabbi Meir understands Eruv is, you had 4,000 amot you could have traveled, 2,000 to the west and 2,000 to the east. You took the 2,000 to the east and you put it to the west. That's how Eruv normally works.
Right.
Here, what did you do? You took the 2,000 to the east away because you started walking towards the west, but you never put it anywhere. So you lost it. Right. So you lost it. So Tosafot has a different view. Tosafot says that it is a safek, and that Rabbi Meir is wondering whether this person is considered an ani or not, a traveler or not, a poor person or not, such that he doesn't need to put bread down. Since he started walking, but he actually went home. Okay, so the question is, so that's another approach. But let's see what the Gemara does here. So Amar Rav Sheshes says, Lo temat hamad Rabbi Meir safek erev safek lo erev. It's not just in a case of safek that Rabbi Meir says that he's caught in limbo. That Rabbi Meir would say that if he definitely didn't make an eruv, that he is caught. In other words, he would say that he's not caught if it's definite. Lo erev chamar gamal. So this fits with what Rashi is saying. In other words, don't think that Rebbe Meir said you're in limbo because we're not sure. He didn't say we're in limbo because we're not sure. He said you're in limbo because you didn't complete the process. So you took away one half of your range of travel and you never put it on the other side.
You didn't complete it and you could have.
You could have and you didn't. So you removed it, but you didn't carry it, so to speak.
Because you decided you were going to take the shortcut of just taking
home, taking a few steps, and you didn't make it the rest of the way. So what does that mean? So that has implications, because that means even in the case that we learned in the previous Mishnah, where the person put the eruv there and it was destroyed before Shabbat, even there, Rebbe Meir is going to say, even if you know it was destroyed before Shabbat, since you put it there, you got rid of your range of motion in the other direction. So even if you definitely didn't establish an eruv, you still lose the range to the east. Okay, that's what Rebbe Meir is.
So what happens then? You climb a tree and stay there the whole trip?
You're stuck. You only have the 2,000 between your house and where the eruv would have been. Now the new Mishnah says, if a person steps out of the Tuchum even one amah, he can't go back in. Rabbi Eliezer says, if he has two, he can go back in. But shalosh lo yikanes, if he walked 3 amot out, he can't go back in. Okay. Now the Gemara says, Rabbi Chanina. Rabbi Chanina says, Raglo achat b'toch tuchum, Raglo achat chutz tuchum. Let's say a person standing right on the Tuchum boundary. One leg is outside the Tuchum, one leg is in. He's doing the hokey pokey. Lo yikanes. He cannot bring it back in. Dichtiv, as it says in the pasuk, Im tashimi Shabbat raglecha. Yeshayahu says, if you return your foot on Shabbat. Raglecha ketiv. It's spelled raglecha, singular, without a yud. So it means you can't even bring 1 foot. So if you have 1 foot on one side of the Tuchum and you have to stand there the whole Shabbat. So don't do that. You'll be stuck with your foot there the whole Shabbat. And vehatanya, but it says in the Braita, raglo achat b'tuchat tchum, raglo achat chutz tchum yikanes. It says that if you have one leg outside the tchum and one leg inside, that you can bring it in. Hamani achirim, that's achirim. Titania, as it says in the Braita, achirim omrim lamakom sherubohu nizkar. That according to achirim, wherever the majority of your body is where you are. So that's why he would say if 1 foot is hanging over the tchum, you can bring it in. But according to Rabbi Chanina, if you have 1 foot over the tchum, you can't bring it in. Ikad Amri Sam have another version of this. Amar Rabbi Chanina raglo achat b'toch tchum, and this is the definitive version. If he has 1 foot inside the tchum, raglo achat chutz tchum, and one is outside, yikanes, he can come in. Dichtiv im tashim mishavar raglecha karinan. That he says that since it says im tashim mishavar raglecha, that if you restrain your foot because of Shabbat, even though it's written without a yud, we pronounce it as raglecha. We read it like it has a yud. We read it like it has a yud, and since we read it like it has a yud, that means both of your feet have to be out for you to be considered out. And it says in the Braita, lo yikanes. What about the fact that it says in the Braita that if 1 foot is over the line, you can't bring it in? Hu de amar k'achirim. Rabbi Chanina is agreeing with achirim. Detanya lamakom sherubohu niskar. So in the first version, he was disagreeing with achirim. Because Rabbi Chanina was saying if 1 foot is over the line and one is within the line, you can't bring your foot in. But achirim says you can. Well, we don't follow him. Second version, Rabbi Chanina is agreeing with Achirim. Achirim said that if 1 foot is over the line and one is, we go by where the majority of your body is, and that's exactly what Rabbi Chanina was saying. Rabbi Eliezer Omer Shtayim Yikanes, Shalosh Lo Yikanes. So Rabbi Eliezer said that if you are 2 amot out of the tchum, you can go back, but if it's 3, you can't go back. V'hatanya, but we said in the Braita, Rabbi Eliezer Omer Achat Yikanes Shtayim Lo Yikanes. According to the Braita, if you have 1 amah out, you can go back in, but 2, you can't. So it's an argument in what Rabbi Eliezer holds. Does Rabbi Eliezer say that you can be 2 amot out, or you can only be 1 amah out of the tchum? Which one? So lo kashi, no problem. Ha de'akar chada v'kama tarte. Ha de'akar tarte v'kama tlata. Atzlat. What does it mean? That if you're standing in the second amah, in other words, the boundary is right here, and you passed 1 amah, you're within 2 amot of the boundary, you can walk in. But if you're in the 3rd amah from the boundary, in other words, you traversed 2 amot already, you're standing in the 3rd amah, then you can't go back in.
That assumes you have to be able to spread your legs 6 feet.
No, you're fully standing there now.
Oh, you're fully standing?
Yeah, in this case, you're fully standing there. Yeah. Ve'atanya, but it says in the Braita, Rabbi Eliezer Omer afilu ama achat lo yikanes. But didn't Rabbi Eliezer say in the third Braita that even if you walk one ama out, you can't re-enter? So now we have three. We have one position that says that if you're within one ama, you can go in, but if it's two, you can't. Then the other Braita said if it's two, you can, but if it's three, you can't. And now it says even if it's one, you can't. Okay, so we explained that if you're in the second ama next to the tchum, in other words, you're within 2 amot of the tchum, you can go back in according to Rabbi Eliezer. If you need to traverse 2 whole amot because you're standing in the third ama, then you can't go back in. But what about the Braita that says that even if you went 1 ama outside the tchum, you can't traverse it? So he says, Ki tanya moded. This is talking about one who is measuring. Ditzan, as it says in the Mishnah, that the one who's measuring, we give him 2,000 amot, and even if the end of his measurement ends in a cave. Now Rashi explains what this means is not where you. In other words, what the Gemara is answering is, we're not talking about where you stepped out of the Tichum. Where you stepped out of the Tichum, that's where Rabbi Eliezer says, as long as you're within 2 amot of the Tichum, you can walk back in. But when you are walking to the end of your 2,000 amot, okay, let's say you have 2,000 amot to go, and you're walking and you come to the end, even if amah number 2,000 ends in a cave, you still have to stop there, right in the middle of the cave. You can't go further into the cave. Okay? You can't go even 1 amah past your 2,000 amot. That's the way that Rashi interprets it. But when you stepped out of the boundary, that's when he said, well, if you're within 2 amot, you can step back in. But to step past your boundary, you can't go. You're not allowed to step past your boundary, even 1 amah, no matter what. The next Mishnah says, the last Mishnah of the Perek says, Mishach chutz l'tchum, a person who night fell upon him when he was outside the tchum. Afilu ama achat lo yikanes. Even if he's 1 ama outside of his tchum, he can't go in. Rabbi Shimon Omer, afilu 15 amot yikanes, she'ena mishuchot mematzin et hamidot mipnei to'im. So it says that if you're right outside the tchum, and they used to put a marker at the tchum that would tell you this is the 2,000 amma mark. You almost made it to within 2,000 amot of your city, but you didn't make it. You were 1 amma outside of it. So Rabbi Shimon says, the Tanakama says you can't walk. You can't make that last step. You're stuck. But Rabbi Shimon says up to 15 amot you can, and Rashi's second version again says this means literally up to 15 amot you can. Why? Because the people who made the boundaries of the Tchumin didn't make them exactly. Because people make mistakes, there's inaccuracies, and so they actually were more conservative. You really have a 15 amma grace space there. And Rashi explains why. Because how did they actually measure the boundary? With a rope. And when you measured it with a rope, there was somebody holding one end of the rope and somebody holding the other end of the rope. Well, if you look at it, so he says that if you subtract the amount of space on the rope that's taken up by the hands that were holding the rope itself, you'll end up with 15 amot of discrepancy in the measurements. He works out exactly how the calculation works. So because you have a 15 amot discrepancy, if you're within 15 amot of the marker, you can walk in, according to Rabbi Shimon. The Gemara says, what does it mean, mipnei to'in, because of those who make mistakes? Tana mipnei to'ei midah, because of those who make mistakes with measurement. In other words, Rashi would say that means because of the error, the measurement error. In other words, there's measurement error of 15 amot, which allows you a grace period or a grace distance of 15 amot from the marker. So that means if you're within 15 amot of the border marker, you're allowed to walk in to the Tichum. Have a great day.